Welcome to the Charity Changemakers podcast, your weekly dose of inspiration and action for the changemakers of the world. Each week, we dive deep into the world of impactful charities. We connect you with the passionate leaders, the innovative ideas, and the real-world stories that are making a difference. Whether you're a seasoned non-profit professional or just starting out, this podcast is your chance to learn from the best and get fired up to make a positive change. We'll explore the challenges and triumphs of running a successful charity. We'll hear about the fundraising strategies, impactful programs, and the stories of the people whose lives are being transformed. But most importantly, we'll leave you feeling empowered and equipped to take action in your community and the organisations in which you work. So, buckle up, Changemakers, because we're about to embark on a journey of inspiration and impact.
Ben, it's great to have you here on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Thanks for coming along. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for the invitation to join.
Yeah, no, you're really welcome. And really pleased that you're able to come and to join us. Look, Ben, as you know, we like to kick off these podcasts with some quickfire questions for individuals. Obviously, I've given you a little bit of an advance warning that they're coming up. But tell me, where's the most interesting place you've ever visited?
For me, I'm fortunate that I have travelled quite a bit, but I think Cambodia for me was one of the most interesting countries.
Yeah.
Didn't really understand the history much before I went, but just to see a country which has almost had a whole generation wiped out, and how they've responded to that and how they've sort of embraced their identity and their country as it is now, and just the beauty of the country itself. It was just a phenomenal time. I spent a month there, and it was incredible. But yeah, it was. I think it just shows, whatever, and we see it in lots of different countries, but countries can go through extreme heartache and political turbulence. But actually, it's the people and the culture that always comes through, and it's just full of love. And I just thought it was a fabulous country.
Yeah. I think it's when you spend that amount of time in a place, isn't it? You spend a little bit longer that you can start to get to know the culture and understand, scratch under the surface a little bit.
Scratch under the surface, absolutely, and just start, talking to people and listening to their stories and where they want their country to be, and where they want to be in the future. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Second quickfire question for you then. What are you reading at the moment?
So I've just finished the Mad Adam trilogy, which was by Margaret Atwood. So 3 books. Yeah. First 2 you can read in any order, and then you've got the final one. Maybe there's a similar sort of vein coming through. So it's about how humans react in dystopian society, and just those human traits. And it was far stretched enough to be fiction, but enough in there that you can relate it back to what's going on in society now. But really enjoyed those 3 books.
Okay, no, I've not come across them. We want to have to go away and look.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Good. And final quickfire question for you then, Ben. Away from work, what do you do? Sort of hobbies or ways that you get to relax outside of work?
So I'm still trying to be proficient in golf, which after, 10 years now, I haven't really seen much progress. But I still love just going out and having 18 holes and just, being outside and enjoying the countryside and the fresh air. I'm from Cornwall originally, so I still like to go to the beach as often as possible. I live in Bath at the moment, so it's only a couple of hours drive, and just being in the ocean and doing some coastal walks. So anything outdoorsy is where I sort of get my peace from.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's great, lovely. And I was at the golf driving range yesterday evening, and I love getting out there and hitting a few balls. I don't play very often, but at the moment I'm just struggling with the hay fever, where I can't. I'm blaming that for why everything swings off to the right.
No, it's definitely a valid reason.
Yes, yeah, indeed. Good. As long as I've got a good valid excuse, then that's absolutely fine. So yeah. Good. Look, Ben, obviously we're here on the Charity Changemakers podcast. We're exploring people's roots into charity sector. I think it's always fascinating, and I see, speak to so many people that come from so many different sectors. But our careers are reversed, where I started in the charity sector and I've ended up in recruitment. But recruitment's where you started, right?
Yeah, eventually, obviously when you're sort of going through college and university, you do any job that you can.
Sure.
And I had some very interesting sort of warehouse jobs and kebab shops and stuff like that. But my first real job, I'll call it my first real job, was recruitment. Yeah. I had a degree in drama theatre studies. So I think a lot of people that study that have sort of outgoing personalities and sort of can easily get into sales jobs, especially sort of telesales jobs and things like that. So I actually went into a recruitment agency looking for a telesales job, and they recruited me to be a recruitment consultant. And that was at Brook Street, working in Westminster. Did about 6 or 7 years working in different recruitment firms. Sure. I think it's a great industry to cut your teeth. I think there's a lot of good things that you learn in recruitment. It's got a terrible reputation in a lot of the firms, but I do think that you learn a lot about relationship skills, account management, presentation, pitching, research. So there's a huge amount that can transfer across the different sectors. Once I moved from London to Bath, I was still in recruitment, and I was really falling out of love with it, falling out of love with every month. At the end of the month, you know what you've done, you get your commission, and then the first of the month, you're back to the beginning again. You've got to hit your BD calls, hit your interviews. So it was just that cycle and that repetition. I was just, it wasn't sort of keeping me entertained. So I wanted to do some volunteering work, and right. I started mentoring a young person who was at risk of entering the criminal justice system. And I started volunteering in a needle exchange, and doing one-to-one triage assessments, but also just doing those needle exchanges as well, and doing some sort of rough sleeping, homeless counts as well in the mornings. Yeah. And that got me thinking about how can I use the skills that I've got, and how can I take that somewhere else. So I moved into what used to be the youth services and connections. Right. Back in the day, and my job there was working with employers to try to increase the number of apprenticeships in South Gloucestershire. There was a huge issue with young people in jobs without training, and it was really trying to invest in trying to get the systems and infrastructure in place. Wherever young people ended, they were still continuing their qualifications and their learning. So it was only a 1-year contract, but it was good. It was a step out of hardcore recruitment. Yeah. And from there I moved into business in the community. Yes. So my first sort of proper charity. Yeah. And when I was there, I was running on the Business Action on Homelessness programme. So still working with employers, but working with people who had been homeless or vulnerably housed, and trying to support them back into employment. Yeah, so
but that first exposure then to the charity sector came from sort of taking up a volunteering opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah. With the volunteering on the CV, it showed that sort of transition, and definitely helped me talk about the client group, the challenges that they're facing, the social challenges, which then helped me get into business in the community.
Yeah. And I guess a bit of a gamble taking a 12-month contract in the first instance. That's that stage of life and going, well, okay, here it is, try and get that opportunity, that I guess that employed experience onto your CV.
Absolutely. And I think, fortunately, we didn't have children at the time. We'd only just got our first mortgage, so it wasn't breaking the bank. And it was just like, my wife sort of could see that I was unhappy, and just said, well, what do you want to do? And let's take a gamble, and let's see if you can make that transition to the charity sector.
Yes, yeah. So talk us through, I guess, after that 12 months, and then as you put it, the first proper role. Talk us through what that looked like.
So it was. Business in the Community is a great organisation. It's big, and at that time, I'd only worked for fairly large companies in terms of recruitment firms. So although we were a regional office, it was a 20 million turnover charity at the time. Really well run, very business-like, as a business corporate membership charity, working with a lot of the FTSE 100s. That's what you'd expect.
Yeah.
But it was really trying to understand, I suppose it's my first exposure about businesses doing good, and how business in the community was trying to broker what was needed in the community to what the business's expertise were, and then looking at the best way for those two entities to come together for the common good. So I was running the Business Action on Homelessness programme, which then moved into the wider, what they called the work inclusion agenda. So looking at people that had unspent convictions and trying to support them back into work. At that time, Business in the Community launched what was called the Ban the Box campaign, which was supported by Boots. And that was trying to support employers to not ask the questions about criminal convictions until the job offer stage. There's a huge amount of research and evidence about the number of people that were getting sifted out at application stage, and actually once employers had met people and seen how they respond in interview and the personalities coming through, if you'd get them to the job offer stage, then they're more likely to be offered that job rather than be filtered out very early on in the process. So that was like a really exciting national campaign, working with DWP, and really, talking to employers who try to change their policies, try to change their mind shifts. So it was exciting to work at something on quite a large scale. I then sort of got promoted to head of community impact for the Southwest, and that was then working across education, pro bono support, employee volunteering, and still the work inclusion campaign. And it was brilliant. It was, working with large businesses, working with their workforces, training them to be job coaches, supporting community organisations to receive legal support, on the pro bono service, and really sort of just seeing how everybody can come together and share the experiences, share the skills, and seeing the business benefits as well as the community benefits.
Yeah. I guess that grounding that you got, I guess, to a degree in your early career in recruitment about relationship management and, trying to manage lots of different stakeholders. It sounds like actually that was quite a transferable skill into what you were doing here.
Hugely transferable. And then also working with, different beneficiary groups. So working with people that had spent 14 years in prison and trying to support them to, how do they present themselves? How do, they've got an unspent conviction for life. They needed to talk about it. So how are you going to present that? How are you going to share that journey and what you've learned from it? And I suppose for my side, it was trying to present it as an employer can receive it. And I think that's where a lot of the misunderstanding is, because when you've had a drug addiction, or you've been homeless, or you've been in prison, you're constantly disclosing. Every time you're with your housing benefit officer or your drug advisor or your mental health advisor, you're disclosing the whole time. And it becomes a norm that the first person you speak to, you just start disclosing. And you've never really practiced how to share that in a professional light.
Yeah.
And also, you don't have to disclose straight away. So there's a lot about supporting the beneficiary groups to understand that, yes, you need to disclose in certain meetings, but that's not your norm. That isn't. You don't have to put yourself in that situation for every conversation that you have.
Yeah.
And it was that sort of stigma which we were trying to remove from the beneficiaries that we were supporting, but also trying to set the employers up that, yes, there is this thing and they will disclose it to you. It may be in writing, it may be face-to-face. It's the most comfortable way that they can feel that they can share that experience with you. But it's also about training them about how to hear that and how to respond to that. It was a much more human thing than a transactional thing, and it was really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And clearly, obviously, the sector, what it gave back to you at that point was that, excitement to be getting out of bed in the morning to go to work, and that, I guess, that fire in your belly.
Absolutely. And seeing change happen, seeing refugees that had never thought they were going to get a job in this country suddenly be employed after going through a boot camp experience and then a work experience placement, and then they get a job at the end of it. And then seeing their eyes light up, their smiles broaden, seeing that they can now start mapping the future, and they can start earning money and getting out of the supported living accommodation that they're in. I never got that in recruitment. Yes, you can get somebody a job and you can negotiate maybe a 10 grand pay rise for them and they're happy, but it's not life changing. Yeah. It's not challenging the status quo of that person's life. So that really lit a fire in my belly.
Good. And that opportunity, like you say, taking those opportunities as they came up, opportunity obviously for promotions within the organisation, and then what came next?
So what came next was I moved into the national team, so started working on sort of national relationships. So working with the likes of Marks and Spencers and Waitrose Convenience, and again, creating work placements, looking at policy changes, looking at pay schedules, really trying to support people. But at that time, I just felt I really got my passion for working directly with the beneficiaries. Yeah. And in that role, it's probably about 70% corporate facing at that time. Mm-hmm. So I saw an opportunity to work for Dame Kelly Holmes Trust. To be honest, I looked at it about 3 or 4 times going, not quite sure it's for me. It was an area manager role for the Southwest, so it was very much like a sideways step. So I was sort of trying to challenge my ego a little bit there to go, it's a sideways, it's not an up. But the cause and the model was fascinating to me. So it was retraining world-class athletes to help them transition through sport or from world-class sport, retraining them to be youth workers, and delivering community-led programs and school-based programs for young people facing challenges in their lives. At the time that I joined them, they were on the crest of a wave. They had a large investment from Sport England just after the youth riots. So there was a lot of targeted work, and it was an exciting place to be. And I was working with world-class athletes. I was working with community partners, and seeing direct delivery on the ground. So that's my next step after I left business in the community.
Yeah, and obviously you were there nearly, the best part of a decade, and what people might not recognise or realise is that the journey there from area manager to eventually being chief executive, there was opportunities obviously that presented themselves in what I imagine was probably, like you say, on the crest of a wave, a bit of a fast-paced environment and organisation to be a part of. Yeah, and I think we're really interested in what that journey. Because we see people chop and change a lot in the charity sector and move from organisation to organisation. But I think there's something that comes, that's quite special about a longevity in an organisation and growing with it and growing into, new roles within an organisation.
Yeah, I think the great thing about Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, they were coming from a place of continual improvement, working with world-class athletes that ask for feedback all the time and ask for how do they improve. That was the culture of the organisation and the staff team as well. So we were always doing personal development. We were always doing team activities. We were working with athletes. We were working with young people and our partners. It was just creating a real sort of culture of continuous improvement, challenging yourself and stepping out of your comfort zone. So then, we were growing at the time. So I think it was only after about a year or something, the opportunity came up within a restructure, and I moved into the head of programs role, which was managing all of our delivery across the UK. So I think at that time it was Scotland, Wales and England, and it's a few years later we moved into Northern Ireland. So for me, that was my first real sort of step into large management. So I think I had about a team of 22 under me at that time. And it was exciting. We had investment, we were growing into new regions. We were, it was all, trying to get a continuous learning cycle from all the different regions, sharing what's working, what isn't, sharing insight, making tweaks to our learning curriculum and to our impact methodology. So it was all, it was a massive learning curve. And then again, through looking at sort of the business need, there was a role created for director of programs. So that was continuing to do all the youth stuff, but actually then having more of a focus on all of our athlete development work as well. So again, being exposed to a whole new world of the likes of UK sport and national governing bodies, to really try to understand that athlete transition support and program that's needed, and look at where we're best working with athletes. At the time, we had a sort of a blended sort of transition program, but we had to focus on those that were going to be the best at youth work. So we made some changes there around just focusing our efforts on where we're going to have the greatest impact for the young people we're here for, because we were sort of beginning to divulge away and looking at trying to get athletes on charity boards and job coaching and business opportunities, but it wasn't core to our model. So there's a bit of a sort of a transition change we needed to do there as well.
Yeah. I wonder how you found that transition from being, so heavily involved in, beneficiary delivery of program and support. And of course that remained in the role, but you're also moving into more senior positions where you're thinking about the strategy, the culture of the organization, the management of the board and investors and funders, and how you found that transition and that learning, and how that was for you at that time.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like when I go into something, I do just jump in with 2 feet and just try to absorb as much as I can as quickly as possible. So I spent time with the head of finance, and I really wanted to understand how the accounts are managed, how our funding categorization is controlled, what I should be looking out for when he's sending, because you just get bombarded with new information, and if you don't know what you're looking for, sometimes you can just sort of shy away. But I've never been one that doesn't ask questions. I've never been fearful that it may be a stupid question, and you quickly learn that other people want to ask that question, but they're not sure if they can. So I think for the first 6 months, it was just questions. I had really good supervision from the chief executive at the time. I was also managing my own subcommittee at the time, so I had direct exposure to board members and was building my relationship with them, and asking questions and learning from their insight as well. So for me, it is my nature just to go all in and just ask and just to try to learn as quickly as possible. But I loved it. I never thought I'd be a geek in governance. I never thought I'd be a geek in finance. I did terribly at school. But I started to see new skills coming out of me and seeing that I have got acumen for different areas of business. And, with the culture that we had in the organisation and the support that we got, there was never like a blame culture. It was always, what don't you know? Where do you think your weaknesses are? How can we support that? I've seen this. Have you seen that in yourself? So there was a lot of sort of reflection. But a lot of reading, a lot of learning.
Yeah. I think it's really, really interesting, that correlation that you make between obviously working with athletes and that continual improvement and wanting to test and to challenge and to look for. Because when you talk about sport, you're talking about minimal gains, aren't you? Small percentages, tiny bits of a second that you might be able to get here and there, and how that working with that group of individuals, and obviously, bringing that into the organisation. But as an organisation grows and looks at working in new areas, how do you then, I guess, instill that culture across charitable organisation?
Yeah, I mean, it's And in my new role, we've been looking at sort of cultures and values and mindset. It all stems from the people, doesn't it? How do you run behaviours and values through the interview process? How do you really create the onboarding experience to be really clear about how we operate as a team, how we work, what we expect from each other? But you can do as much as that as you can, and that's really important. But unless people see that in the organisation, then it is just tokenistic. So for us, it was that sort of self-reflective practice. So ensuring we had strong supervision exercises and having values as part of that, and managers feeding back where they've seen the values being lived and breathed, but also where they might have seen sort of a conflict with some of the values in certain situations or about certain behaviours, linking as much as we can back to our values in terms of team meetings, or company-wide meetings, even socials and team building activities, just having the values running through and the culture running through. But I think it's got to stem from the top, from the senior management team. If you're trying to create a culture where everyone feels empowered, and everyone feels that their voice is being heard, and that they have a say in how the organisation's going, then bureaucracy doesn't help that. Having loads of chains of command doesn't help that. The amount of, I've seen many times where great ideas have been diluted or squashed because it's gone from lower down to manager to head of to director, and then it goes back down this way and then back down that way. And by the time it's come back, you've lost all momentum and enthusiasm, and individuals feel like actually that isn't the case. So I think it's about sort of trying to not create silos, not trying to create too much chain of commands and bureaucracy, especially when it's about ideas. And I think if you can do that, then whatever your cultural values are, I'm assuming no one's got a cultural value of bureaucracy or anything like that, then that's, I think, where the ideas and feeling like you belong and feeling like your voice is part of this organisation. I think that's where it really comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked a little bit, obviously, about where you're instilling that, obviously, where you are at the moment, Chief Executive of ReachOut. And what's that, coming up 9 months or so, I think?
Eight months, coming up, coming into 9 months,
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been that transition and that change, and about, I guess, those learnings that you've taken from previously within the sector, and how you transfer that into a new organisation. I mean, do you want to tell us a little bit about ReachOut and what the organisation looks like today?
Yeah, so ReachOut has been going for just over 20 years. Started out as a voluntary after-school club in Manchester, a group of volunteers coming together to help young people who are facing disadvantage with their sort of maths and English homework. So fast forward 20 years, now operating in London, Manchester and Liverpool, supporting about 1,000 young people a year.
Wow.
And through a volunteer base of about 750 volunteers who are matched with young people. We still deliver after school provision, but it's much more around sort of social emotional learning now, rather than sort of just academic mentoring. But it's really helping young people to develop confidence in themselves, help them with their public speaking, help them with their problem solving skills, help them with their confidence in academia, or at least looking at how that's applied in real life, rather than sort of the exam pressures, and helping with those key sort of stages in life. So transitioning from primary to secondary school, settling into secondary school, and then sort of thinking of the wider aspirations and world of work. So we create work experience visits, career talks, and then the mentors share their work experiences as well. So it's a brilliant organisation. I think one of the things that appealed to me the most was the long-term support that we provide. So we have a brilliant guy in our team now called Bavin, who started on ReachOut programme in year 6 in primary school. And he was mentored all the way through to his GCSEs. He's still connected with his mentor when he left school, and he was doing his A-levels, who supported him with his university application. And then Bavin went on to do university degree and an MA, and now he works for us in our finance and operations team. Yeah, and for me, that was really something quite special. And I think education isn't setting up young people to deal with the challenges in life. It's so, let's link it back to sport. If you're only focusing on medal success, you're not focusing on the wider holistic health and care of that person.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only focusing on GCSE attainment, you're not focusing on the wider health and care of that individual. The amount of money that's gone in with the catch-up fund after COVID, it's all about tutoring, it's all about academic success and attainment and catch-up. The social and emotional skills of these young people, they're just not being nurtured. And I think, ReachOut and a lot of other brilliant organisations, that's where we're stepping in and seeing the need for our work. And how are young people going to cope in a world where AI is going to take over all academic need and learning? We're not going to need to know all of this in the future. But what we are going to need to do is know how to cope and be resilient and be human centric. And so for me, there's a void in the educational system and in systemically. But the young people we see on our programs, they haven't got the role models that others young people do. They haven't got the same opportunities that other young people do. So for us, it's about creating opportunities for them to fail safely and to see themselves grow and to learn how they react in those coping mechanisms. And it's a special organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the power of mentoring there, I mean, you've just demonstrated in that one store. I mean, you talk about 750 volunteers, but the power of that mentor, obviously working with that individual over a sustained period of time, and the impact that that's had is just huge, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Babin shared his story recently. He was growing up in a council flat in Hackney. The only thing that he saw was drugs and drug dealers. Yeah. At a young age, school identified him to go onto a male prison visit because they thought that was going to be the route that he was going to go down. And on the same sort of day, he was then referred into the ReachOut program. Yeah. So his life, even in his opinion, in his eyes, he was only going to go down one route. And all he needed was just that one person to believe in him, one weekly session to go to where he could see himself in a different light, be around different people in different environment, an environment of positivity and learning. And that sort of helped him step his path to where he is now. So that's one story. Absolutely. There's so many of them. But it is the power of mentoring and someone believing in you.
Yeah, absolutely. And presumably all the mentors that you got through ReachOut, are they all volunteers then within the organisation?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a sort of, I suppose, three routes of volunteering. We have corporates, that might be through corporate partnerships or just those that have, that are working and they volunteer sort of individually. We have a lot of university students, especially in the Northwest, that volunteer with us. We have some great university partnerships. And then we have community-based, so just people that may be retired or may have some time on their hands and want to give back and be more connected to their local community. So they're sort of like the three strands of our volunteering base.
Yeah, great. And presumably if people are listening and being challenged by what you said or thought, oh, blimey, I got time to do that, then presumably landing on your website's a good place.
Landing on our website, we're about to go live for recruitment for the next academic year. So, please do. And, at the moment, we're just about to, next year, we're launching a few more flexible volunteering opportunities as well, because it is quite a time commitment. So we're looking at sort of monthly mentoring volunteers as well. There'll be much more opportunities.
Yeah. Great. Good. Well, it was slight side, but definitely, no, absolutely. We're to take that opportunity while we can, Ben. Obviously, I'm really interested in this transition into, chief executive of an organisation with, hubs in various different parts of the country. Recognise, you've already mentioned you live in a different part of the country as well. What does that kind of managing a team over multiple centres, and I guess then some remote workers, some that are in, what does the sort of makeup of the organisation look like?
Yeah, so in ReachOut, we've got sort of two hubs. We've got our Manchester office and we've got our London office. We have a hybrid working model, so most people are in the office 2 days a week. And then we also have our freelance staff who are sort of sessional workers, the project leaders. And we have about sort of 45 of those, but based around sort of London, Manchester and Liverpool. I think since COVID, a lot of, everyone's now used to Teams and virtual meetings, and they're sort of standard, and you and I have spoken, Adam, about how do you keep those live and how do you keep them fresh, and that is a challenge because it can just become a cycle and stagnated agenda items and everything else. For me, it's all about having purpose for every time people are on a call. So we have sort of monthly meetings, which are virtually, but we try to put spotlights onto different areas of the organisation, make sure that we have lots of different people contributing, making sure we've got success stories and case studies coming through, and here, bringing the impact, keeping the impact fresh for everybody, especially those that aren't direct delivery or on the ground. Making sure that they are hearing the stories and they feel connected to the purpose and the drive of the organisation. We have quarterly get-togethers where the whole team come together. Right. They are often, and I'm hugely guilty of this, trying to put too much into the agenda. Because you just, everyone's together, you're excited, you just want to, talk about loads of different things. So it's trying to keep those focused, but make sure that we've got, the social time, that we're talking about, important things, but also that we're talking about creative things, and we've got, different ideas coming into different things. I think for me, stepping into this organisation, I've been at Dame Kelly Holmes Trust for, like you said, nearly 10 years, chief exec for just over 5.5 years. And, I knew everything there. It was my first time as chief exec. So coming into this role, it was like, okay, so I'm not going to know anything, not going to know any process, not really going to know, people and behaviours and what, what drives them, what they're committed to. So, the very first thing we touched on as a team was, cultures and behaviours and values, and, started workshopping those ideas. And one of the things that I'd introduced at Dame Kelly Holmes Trust during COVID was something called Manual on Me. Right. And it's actually shared from Deloitte. We were on a program called the Deloitte Digital Connect program, and they shared a very simple tool. But I introduced it at ReachOut, and it was just, what's my job look like? Why am I working at ReachOut? And what do I want from the this opportunity in the organisation? What I believe in, just in terms of values and everything else. How I like to work. So how do I like to? What time do I want to have my first call? What do you need to know about me in terms of, like, I drop the kids off in the morning, I don't really want to have a call before 9:30 because I just need a cup of coffee and a bit of time to settle in. But just all those little things. How do I like to receive feedback? So we all did it. 21 people did it in terms of the core staff team. Yep. It then links to the organogram, so everybody can go into the organogram and click on any individual, and it goes straight to their Manual on Me. Yeah. So you can just start learning about people, and that was a brilliant tool for me to come into the organisation and do with everyone, because it just gave me that insight into how people like to work, how people like to receive information, receive feedback, what's important to them. So having that building into the cultures and values, which hadn't been refreshed, I think, for quite a number of years. Yeah. And at the moment, we've got it to a place, and now we're going to look at it again once we're a bit closer on with the strategy, to then go, right, so we now know where we're going. We've got this in terms of how we want to work together. What's that going to look externally? How's that going to look internally? So I think it's just that you can't do everything at once, and sometimes I try to, and that's one of my weaknesses. But it's making sure you've got that communication, that talking. Sorry, I feel like I've just gone off on a little path. I hope
no. I find that really fascinating. Really fascinating, really insightful, because I think it's a challenge that I think many organisations are facing, where the ways of working have changed quite significantly. Even for us here, we're a small organisation, 10 employees, gone from being completely in an office 5 years ago to, completely remote now, and thinking about, well, we can't just imitate the ways we used to work online, because it doesn't
Yeah.
work in the same way. And, the ways in which you communicate with people is huge. And I'm talking to charities on a daily basis, weekly basis, that are going through this very transition. So I think the manual on me is really, fascinating, because it's something that's not just a tool there for you, but also for the wider team to think about how they work with one another. And I guess help breaks down some of those silos working, and getting something across to someone in just the wrong way, or not quite approaching things in a way that is going to land well.
No, absolutely. And and if someone isn't reacting how you want them to, it's a great tool to go back to. Go, oh, they hate bullet points in emails. Okay, let me pick up the phone and give them a quick call. But it is, and I think silo working and feeling isolated, especially at Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, there was a lot of that, because we didn't have, we had a very small office, and although we had weekly calls, people were feeling a bit isolated, and it was coming out of COVID. So very conscious of that. And I think it is around, I'm trying not to contradict myself here. It's about trying to have enough purposeful time with people, where you're not just going straight into meeting agenda. That you, even on the virtual calls, you do have that time to learn what people have been doing over the weekend, to learn if someone's picked up the guitar and new talents, or whatever that might look like.
Sure.
But it's very easy just to go straight into agenda, meeting, close, and then we're off. And I think it's about affording yourselves, in every conversation or every interaction you've got with someone, just that time to be human, like you would be in the office. You don't go into the office and straight away go, right, let's talk about what you're going to do today. It's all about, how was your weekend? How was your evening? What have you been up to? And it's, how do you create moments just to have that human piece? And I think it's, it is trying to be conscious of that. But no, it's a challenge, and again, looking at accountability and looking at trying to reduce silo working. I've used Monday.com in my previous role, and we started to introduce that. So there is that transparency of what people are working on, what stages it's at, how that links to organisational objectives and all the key results. So you've got like an organisational view and balanced scorecard about where we are with certain strands of work. And it is something, it might not be Monday.com, but be something like that, how we're going to introduce that into ReachOut. So there is just much more awareness of sort of pinch points and everything else. And then we also do like a fortnightly now bulletin, where teams are just putting sort of key areas of work, pinch points, successes. But again, it's just trying to keep that. It's very easy just to be focusing in on what you do, especially if you're like, in finance. How do you try to keep them, aware of what's going on in the wider context of people's roles and day-to-day lives?
Yeah, and that opening, it sounds like clearly your approach is a very open and honest and transparent approach to leadership. I wonder whether, what we're talking 8-9 months in, ways in which you're potentially reaping the benefits of that in an organisation. I know it's early days, but thinking about the strategy and future direction of the organisation, what does that kind of, I guess, that wider team involvement and being a part of that journey, how are you reaping the benefits of that at this moment in time?
Yeah, so I think, I am just open. I like to listen. I don't, there's no sort of hidden agendas. And I hopefully I've shown that since I've started. Within a week, everyone was down in London, and we were talking, and that sort of continued. So obviously it's about sharing your direction, sharing your timeframes and where you want to be going. So one of my key priorities is around the strategic review. So being very clear about, this is how we're going to be undertaking the strategic review. This is where I need your support and your input. We set up a strategy working group, which had members of the board and members of the team from all levels of the organisation, who were then meeting fortnightly and monthly as it developed, and getting their ideas and all of their supports. We were doing stakeholder engagements, which included the staff team as well, about where we've been, what's worked, what hasn't, what we're brilliant at, where should we be going in the future. And then the wider stakeholders, talking to parents, young people, teachers, funders, mentors, project leaders. So, it's been a real journey, but at every stage, it's keeping everybody aware, making sure that they're involved, going back to sessions. So when you've had a workshop and you've got some questions or queries or thoughts, then the next workshop, you're not just ignoring what's happened before. You're taking people on that decision-making journey, but also just around what it looks like. I've come in, and I say we, because we've got like a new chair and 6 new trustees as well.
Wow.
So there is a change agenda happening here, and I think it's by only being open that people buy into it, and that they will go, okay, this is going to be messy for a bit, but I know what we're doing as an organisation. And at each stage, I've got an opportunity to feed back into if I believe in this or not, if I think it's going to work or not, and if it could work, that could be the issues that we're going to be facing over the next sort of 6 to 12 months or 18 months. But sorry, going back to what I was meant to say, it's about sort of understanding what it's going to look like. So, you heard of the pit of despair? It's like the emotional journey of sort of making something brilliant. And it all starts off really excited, and then the further you go down the journey is sort of going closer to the pit of despair, because things are changing. You're challenging assumptions. You're challenging, why we're doing things. Why have we doing this program curriculum in this way? Have we got the data? Have we got the insight to inform our decisions? Why do we do this process in this way? Because it's always been done. Okay, well, let's stop and think about, is this the best process for it? So we're looking at operational changes, strategic changes, curriculum changes. We're looking at, where we're going to be working in the future and who we're going to be focusing in on to really be sort of purposeful and clarity with our intent. So when you're sort of changing so much, it can feel very messy, and you can slowly go down this pit to go, we're never going to get out of this, and we're never going to go back, and get into a better place and a new status quo where everything's working brilliantly. And we've got research and evidence and data and insight to back everything that we're doing. But by explaining sort of that there is a curve, that we are going to end, at some stage in this journey, we may enter this pit of despair at different stages, and we may enter it more than once. But it's going to be exciting, but it is also going to be challenging. But when we get through this as a team, when we get through it together, we're going to be in a much stronger position. And I think just being open about that and sort of sharing that sort of visual with people to say, it's going to be messy, but it's going to be great, and we're going to get through it. And I think that helps sort of bring people along on the journey. And so far it's been exciting. It's been quite fast paced, but I think we've got a brilliant team here, and I've no doubt that we'll get through the pit.
Absolutely. And absolutely, with that drive and that motivation, because clearly it's about wanting to, improve the amount of impact that you can have in an organisation, reach more young people, isn't it? Deliver services in more places, reach more higher quality, all of those types of things, which mean, like you say, you've got to go through that journey. But sometimes it could be very easy to go into an organisation and just, keep things at the status quo. But, I love the fact that there's an ambition and an excitement and a passion and a motivation, a driver across, the board, yourself, the whole of the wider team to want to reach more and do more.
Absolutely. But and I think for any organisation, and maybe more for the smaller ones, under 2 million turnover, I think if you're just hoping that you can stay the same, and that you're going to be all right and going to survive, I think that's a dangerous place to be. I think, organisations of our size, we need to be innovating all the time. We need to be looking at new ways of doing things. How do we create efficiencies? How do we create economies of scale? We need to be challenging our thinking at all times. How do we diversify income? Because the funding landscape, as you know, Adam, is tough. It's extremely challenging. And the more that we can sort of predict our income, the more we can then invest in improving in different areas or creating digital solutions. But if we're just going to stand still, try to stay on the same direction, you're going to fluctuate, you're going to have some highs, some lows, but essentially you're not building the foundations and really building the barriers to entry that you're going to need to try to create your own market. And that's sort of the journey that we're on.
Yeah, absolutely. And those small margins that you were talking about earlier in the conversation, actually, really important, I guess, and about you instill here. And I guess to a degree, and how comfortable sometimes organisations are this about, testing ideas as well, and recognising that not everything's going to land. But actually, if we don't have a culture of, well, let's give it, sometimes we've got to try these things to know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the board have been brilliant with that as well. And, we've set ourselves a target to test a lot of things next year, to just challenge our thinking and challenge some of the assumptions that we've got as an organisation. So that may be, the length of the programme each year. It may be the mentor ratios. Is one-to-one mentoring as powerful as a 3-to-1 ratio, where you've got some more peer learning going on in that mentoring cycle, which would create capacity in the volunteering team, which would mean we could do different things in volunteering, or we could go into a new region. And looking at really embedding a learning framework. So we've been working with the Centre for Youth Impact and looking at sort of their impact methodology around social emotional skills, so we can then start benchmarking ourselves against different organisations. I think for us, it's we've been quite internally looking for a number of years, and actually there's a lot out there. Working with organisations and expertise, bringing in external support organisations around IT that we've just brought in, financial accounting that we've just brought in as an external supplier, HR support. So you don't need to have all these fixed costs from within and learn and develop. There's brilliant partnerships and brilliant services that you can bring in to strengthen your foundations. One of the things we've been doing is around this external looking piece is also going out to visit other charities. So our programs and impact team, they've gone to see other charities and how they deliver their programs. So they've been out to see Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, they've been out to see Football Beyond Borders, they've been out to see other sessions. And just, if you've only seen your own delivery for the last 5 years, how are you, really creating new ideas and new ways of thinking? So we've been doing a little bit of that as well and trying to bring that insight back into how we operate. So there's a lot to do, but it's about looking at what's out there rather than trying to develop everything from scratch.
Yeah, indeed. I think the charity sector is really improving in that area, about that partnership working, about learning from one another, about opportunities of even working or delivery of service together. We're seeing more and more of that across the sector. And I think that's only going to bring a greater impact across these local communities into individuals' lives across the country. So it's always encouraging when you hear organisations working in that way, which is great. So Ben, I feel like there's a whole conversation there around funding and the future, the future for ReachOut, isn't there? There's probably another podcast in it. I think it's probably one of these things where we'll have to get you back on, I think, in sort of 12, 18 months time.
In 12, 18 months, we'll see what that journey's been looking like.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's been absolutely fascinating to hear about your career journey. I think, my initial reflections are, clearly someone really, that golden thread of, supporting people in local communities, which is, really inspiring to hear. But, opportunities that as they presented, being able to take them in the sector that's obviously invested in you as a leader within organisations to help you to grow, and just the way in which you're now leading organisations in that same way and investing in teams, supporting teams, bringing individuals through is really inspiring to hear. So thank you for coming on and sharing your journey with us. One final question I'm going to throw at you that I've not given you any prep for. I mean, is there a piece of career advice that you've been given at some point, that's been really insightful or really helpful? Or I guess if I was to flick that the other way, if you were to go back and speak to yourself earlier on in your career and give yourself a piece of advice, what do you think it might be?
For me, it's just listen. I always thought that I knew the best way out. I always thought that I could try to solve a solution or a challenge or an issue, without sort of external support. But there's so much you learn just from listening. And this is very directed to me as a youngster. If you listen more, you learn, you gain insight. I don't know if you've ever seen Hamilton, but there's a brilliant part of one of the songs going sort of talk less, listen more. And I think that I've tried to learn that because I can be sort of quite sort of outspoken and sort of be sort of the main voice. And I've definitely tried to ask the right questions, but really listen, and reflect on what you're hearing. Because that's where the richness comes. So that would be, it's not maybe career advice, but that's a message to my younger self. I probably would have not been in so many scrappy situations if I'd listened more.
No, that's brilliant. That's really, really helpful. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it's been great, Ben, to catch up. Look, I'm sure there's going to be people that have got questions or things that maybe they want to fire at you or even connect with you. I guess if we tag you up on LinkedIn when we post the podcast, is it happy for people if they want to drop you a message, drop you a note to get in touch that way? Yeah,
perfect. Thank you.
Great. Good. Ben, it's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you for coming on the podcast, and we'll catch up again soon.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. Take care.
Cheers.
And that's a wrap for this week on the Charity Changemakers podcast. Remember, you can be the change you want to see in the world. We hope that this episode has inspired you to get out there and make a difference. This podcast was brought to you by Charisma Charity Recruitment, one of the UK's leading recruitment consultancies for the charity sector. Whether you're a passionate professional seeking your next challenge or a charity searching for a top-tier talent, Charisma Charity Recruitment can help. Visit their website at charismarecruitment.co.uk to explore their latest positions and to connect your organisation with the change makers shaping the future of the non-profit world. Thanks for joining us.